How many times has the Secretary spoken to his Israeli counterpart since Sunday?
Since Sunday, the Secretary spoke with Minister Gallant on Sunday. He spoke with him twice on Tuesday and then again yesterday, which was Wednesday.
So he spoke to him before and after these attacks were reported in Lebanon over 2 days. What's his reaction? What's his response? What did he support? Was he informed ahead of time? If he was, what was he told? And so what's his reaction to these attacks?
So in terms of, the attacks that we're seeing in Lebanon, we were not aware of either incident of what happened on Tuesday or on Wednesday. We're continuing to monitor what's happening in the region. I'm not going to be able to go beyond what General Ryder also read out at the podium from the Secretary's calls. But what I can tell you is that I just don't have more to provide on these incidences. But to what Lito was asking on the larger point on, regional escalation, that's something that, of course, we're worried about, we're concerned about. That's why you've seen us move the assets that we have to the region, which does send a message. I think to anyone that would want to attack our forces or attack Israel, that we are there in their self-defense. But we've been very clear from the beginning. We do not want to see a wider regional conflict, and that's something that's certainly on the Secretary's mind.
Well, just finally, previously you guys have said that you had seen the Iranians' posture to respond to the assassination of a Hamas official in Iran months ago. Do you guys still see that posture, that they're ready or thinking about responding? Has that increased since these attacks in Lebanon? Because I think it's been reported that the Iranian ambassador was also wounded in these attacks.
To my knowledge, we haven't seen any change in their force posture. We'll continue to monitor. I can only speak for U.S. forces and what we are capable of doing and how we are postured. And I'll remind you that the capability that we have in the region is more than we had on April 13th when Iran did launch that attack against Israel. So we're confident in the ability that we have there right now to protect our forces, and should we need to, come to the defense of Israel as well. Yes, hi.
Thank you, Sabrina. What happened over the past couple of days, regardless of who the culprit is, it just doesn't help putting out the fire in the region and doesn't help the efforts at all, right? Like at preventing anything wider in the region.
Is that a question?
Yeah, is that correct?
I would say that any attack that is going to escalate tensions in the region is not going to be helpful to de-escalating any tensions, or to, ultimately what we want to see is a ceasefire deal come through. We want to see hostages come home. We want to see, the war that's happening in Gaza come to a close. And that's why you're seeing so many efforts from different parts of this administration continuing to engage in the region and trying to, get a ceasefire deal in place. And we keep getting close. And, I would refer you to the State Department and others to kind of speak more to that framework. But that's what we ultimately want to see in place. Anything that adds to raising those regional tensions, of course, is not going to be helpful. And that's why, the Secretary has been clear. You'll have to remember, and you can look back at some of our statements from then, on October 8th, when we were moving assets to the region, when the Ford was moved to the Eastern Mediterranean, we were talking about not wanting to see this escalate to a wider regional conflict. And we've been very consistent in that since, the beginning.
Considering all of that, the Israeli government are now saying that they're entering a new phase in the war, and now they're going to focus on the north. God knows how long that is going to take, because the last one has been going on for more than 11 months now. And we can't even talk about a distant dream of this ceasefire now. It was 90% just a couple of weeks ago. Now we're not even talking about the possibility of a ceasefire. So when all of this is happening, can you please once again reiterate that we're fully behind Israel militarily, no matter what happens, no matter what your policy is, we'll come to your defense?
So just on the, what the comments that you're referencing came from Minister Gallant, I would refer you to his office to speak to that. I'm the spokesperson for the Secretary, not him. We are there. The movements that you've seen us made are there also to protect our own forces in the region that have come under attack in different places in the Middle East. The president has been very clear that we are there to support Israel in their self-defense should they need it. And you don't have to be reminded, but on April 13th, they were the recipient of a massive attack from Iran. So should that attack or something like that ever happen again, we have forces in the region to help defend Israel. And that is a commitment that you've seen this administration make. Louis.
Yes, there's some media outlets in Israel, and I believe in Axios, that are reporting that Secretary Austin has postponed a trip to the region, specifically to Israel. Can you provide any details on that, please?
Yeah, thanks, Louis, for the question. As you know, we haven't announced any upcoming trips, so I don't have anything to announce today. When we are ready to announce a trip, we certainly will keep you updated, but I just don't have more to share on that.
Can I follow up with another question?
Sure.
The Secretary and Minister Gallant have been speaking quite frequently. And during those communications, pre and post, I believe one of the readouts from the Israeli side, I think it was on Monday night, said that the opportunities for a diplomatic solution in Lebanon were decreasing. Is that something that, an assessment that is also shared here by the Pentagon in the wake of that conversation?
Well, in terms of the ceasefire deal, I would refer you to the State Department, who's really the lead on that. But I can tell you that we do not believe that the deal is falling apart. We believe that that is the best way to end the war that's happening in Gaza and to lower those tensions in the region. And that's why you keep seeing administration officials from all across this administration go back into the region and continue to engage, different countries, different partners there to try and bring a deal closer together. Because ultimately what we're talking about is bringing hostages home and an end to what has been, I think it was referenced earlier, an almost year-long conflict. And that's what I think everyone wants to see, is this come to a close and see a new path forward for the Palestinians in Gaza and see our hostages come home. No, is the deal done? I don't think so. We're still working towards that every single day, but we need the commitment from all of those involved to make sure that it can be put into place. Joseph.
Thank you, Sabrina. So back to the 4 or 5 phone calls between Secretary Austin and Minister Gallant. Is it fair to say, because if we read the press releases here at the Pentagon and we see the Israeli reports, it looks like Secretary Austin is not on the same page with Minister Gallant when it comes to reducing tensions, avoiding any incursion in Lebanon. Is it fair to say that there are some differences between Secretary Austin and Minister Gallant?
Well, I won't speak for Minister Gallant. I can only speak for Secretary Austin. I think there is a shared agreement that no one wants to see this broaden out to a wider regional conflict. There's also an agreement that we want to see a ceasefire deal put into place. The parameters of that deal and how it gets implemented, those are still being negotiated. And again, I would refer you to the State Department, who's really lead on, and the NSC, who's really lead on some of those negotiations. But I certainly think there's agreement between both countries that we do not want to see a wider regional conflict.
So what you're saying now, this is your vision towards the conflict in the region. Do you believe that the Israelis are listening to these points that you mentioned?
I think they're certainly listening. You wouldn't see this amount of communication between Secretary Austin and Minister Gallant.
Are they accepting?
Yeah, so I appreciate the question. I'm not going to go beyond the readouts. What I can tell you is that every time that the Secretary engages Minister Gallant or anyone else in the region, these are direct conversations that are being had about not wanting to see this widen out to a broader regional war. And they have conversations about other things too, whether it's, operations being conducted within Gaza, whether it's tensions growing on that northern border. Their conversations, I would push back on the premise that they're not listening when there's so many conversations between the two of them so frequently that, of course, there's engagement. We can agree to disagree at times, but I'm just not going to be able to provide more than the readouts.
So one is, the administration's been quite clear that it's going to do what it needs to do to help Israel defend itself. Does that apply to an Israeli offensive into Lebanese territory? That's the first question. The second question relates to, Israeli intentions. You said that the United States and Israel share the desire to not have this escalate into a regional war. Would an escalation in Lebanon be that regional war that you're trying to avoid? And if so, help me understand how there is agreement there between the United States and Israel.
So on your first question, Phil, I think we've been pretty clear from the beginning that we are there in the defense of Israel should we need to come to their defense. We're not going in and supporting offensive ground operations in what they do, whether it be in the north or in Gaza. And the president has been very clear that you're not going to have U.S. boots on the ground in Gaza. As you might remember, when we set up a maritime corridor that brought close to 30 million pounds of aid through. We did not have U.S. boots on the ground to do that. So the president was very clear at the very beginning on what the United States' role is when it comes to Israel's operations. On your second question, look, without going down the rabbit hole of hypotheticals, and not wanting to define what a broad war would look like, we don't want to see a regional conflict spread. Right now, we believe the conflict still has remained contained into Gaza. Ultimately, the best way for things to resolve and for tensions to lessen is by diplomatic means, and that's why you're seeing such an aggressive push from many different officials across the administration that continue to travel back to the region or elsewhere to engage officials on both sides to make sure that we can reach that type of ceasefire. Yes.
Thank you, Sabrina. Regarding what's happened the last 2 days in Lebanon, so how much damage did you think, with your assessment, of course, that Hezbollah has been done because of this explosive? And do you think these steps or these explosives will deter Hezbollah from attacking Israel again? And my last question will be, do you still confident that the diplomacy is still possible to solve this tension, high tension of the border there?
Yes, absolutely. Diplomacy is the best way to resolving the tensions that we're seeing in the Middle East. That's absolutely not a corridor that's closed off. That's certainly a path that you've seen so many folks from this administration engage on and continuing to urge forward for diplomacy, because that is ultimately the best way to reach a ceasefire deal in Gaza. In terms of an assessment on the attack, I just don't have that for you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. A quick question on the new leader of Al-Qaeda. Some reports indicated that